name is Angie Viscianen, and I run a company called Leg Up Legal. We provide a mentoring program that connects prospective law students to lawyers for mentoring. And we started doing these Zoom meetups during COVID-19 to allow students to connect with each other and lawyers to learn more about the legal profession. So today I have a very special guest with me. Rachael Coll is a lawyer and certified life coach, and she helps lawyers and law students figure out how to manage their relationships while they're in law school and while they're practicing. So she's here to talk to you today about balancing love and law school. I think this is a really important topic because it's one that not a lot of people talk about. And it's important that you manage your own personal relationships, even when you're in law school. It's going to be really hard to juggle all of those things and your academic performance. And so I think it's important to go ahead and talk about this topic, because I think a lot of people want to just sweep it under the rug, but we should at least acknowledge it and give you some good tips as to how to manage it. So Rachael, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Angie. Hi, you guys. I am so excited to be here with you all. I always tell Angie I'm like blown away by the caliber of students and recent grads that follow her. I graduated law school in 2007, and I just feel like I was such a, you guys would not have hung out with me. I was embarrassing then. And I'm just really impressed by all of you and how motivated you are. I didn't even know what LinkedIn was. It did exist back then, but I was not active on it. I wasn't networking. I wasn't trying to meet more senior people in my field or in my profession. Keep introducing yourselves in the chat, and go ahead and ask your questions if you don't want to jump on camera. I know this can be a topic that's kind of private, so ask your questions however you're comfortable and I'll get to you for sure. So I'm just excited that you guys are here and that you're curious about networking and knowing things about the field, the practice area, and particularly self-development and mental health, which is the space I'm in now. A little bit of background on me. I grew up in New York City. I came to DC for law school in 2004. I went to Catholic University. If any of you guys are in school in DC or specifically a Catholic, let me know. I loved law school. I know that's a weird thing to say, but I really did. First year was kind of rough. Jeremy, I hear you on surviving week 3 is an accomplishment on its own. It's just a different way of learning than anything you've ever done before. And so I totally get just feeling your brain's being unpacked and taken apart, and trust me, they'll put it back together for you at the end of year 3. But I really liked law school, and I didn't actually know what kind of law I wanted to practice. Both of my parents were attorneys. And so I kind of envisioned myself going into corporate or transactional law, something like what my parents did. They were very are you sure you want to go to law school? It's really not that much fun. And I was that makes me want to go even more, because they're kind of against it. So I rebelled by going to law school. But I did kind of think I would follow in their footsteps and do something, big firm, transactional. I ended up not doing that. After my 3rd year of law school, I clerked for a judge who I met in my 3rd year in a trial practice class, actually. And funny enough, I'd never really been a huge fan of positive feedback. I felt like it was kind of useless, and because it was pre-coaching, it almost made me uncomfortable when people were like, oh, you did this really well. I'd be like, oh, they're just saying that to be nice. And I just didn't do a lot or find it really all that constructive. What I really enjoyed and absorbed a lot of in law school in particular was the opportunity for constructive criticism. And this judge in this trial practice class, I'll never forget, we're still good friends however many years later. It's been way too long since I clerked, but he said to me, do you know after you ask every question on direct exam, you say okay after the witness answers? And he's like, it's really annoying. It was I love this man. I need to work for him, because if I got a nugget like this every week for 52 weeks of a clerkship, I will be the best lawyer ever by the end. So that gives you a little sense of how I function. But so I did clerk for him. I ended up applying and using that example in my cover letter, even though it totally deviated from traditional cover letter format. I was I loved that you just kicked my butt in this class. So I clerked for him, and during the course of that process, realized almost in a guilty way that I loved criminal practice. I was watching, he was in a criminal rotation, and I was this is everything. I get why there are like a million TV shows about this. It's just the most fascinating practice area you can be in. And so the jurisdiction I was in was just outside DC in Montgomery County, Maryland. And I was like, you could go one way or the other with the public defender's office, state's attorney's office, which is what we call the DAs. Like politically, they weren't all that different. And the state's attorney actually, who is still the state's attorney to this day, really encourages his assistant state's attorneys to dismiss cases as though it's their responsibility to do so when they don't have the evidence. So it's a very progressive DA, state's attorney's office experience, which is what I was looking for. So I knew I wanted to do criminal law. I applied to the public defender's office and the state's attorney's office and just happened to get an offer from the state's attorney's office first. So off I went. I loved every single second of it. I fell on my face, made a complete fool of myself in court. I didn't literally fall on my face. I should clarify that's totally possible, but I just didn't happen to have that experience in court. But I did do the emotional and psychic equivalent of falling on my face a number of times. You learn by doing, you learn by failing, you learn by embarrassing yourself, trust me. And all in all, though, it was just an incredible experience, but I wasn't moving up in the office as quickly as I would like to, only because it's a government agency. It was a very comfortable, affluent, beautiful community to work in, which makes it a great place to live, but not necessarily a great place to be a prosecutor when you're sort of dealing with 7 to 10 felony homicide or sex offense cases in a year. So I left that office after 3.5 years and moved by way of a small stint in a private practice position. Ended up in Baltimore City doing criminal prosecution in sex offense and domestic violence cases, which, as you can imagine, if any of you are familiar with Baltimore City, it was definitely more active than Montgomery County. And I got tons of amazing experience. That was where I really honed my skills as a prosecutor. I learned evidence really like on my feet. I learned how to cross-examine experts, how to introduce serology and DNA reports, how to interview forensic nurses and experts on a witness stand. It was just like the best experience a person interested in criminal practice and specifically sex offense and domestic violence cases. Like I tried more than 20 felony cases a year. It was just incredible. So sidetrack to my amazing practice experience in my work life, I was really struggling in my personal life. And when I say I was struggling, it didn't look like a hot mess, right? From the outside looking in, I don't think. It looked like I was consistently in relationships that were like anywhere from a year long to sometimes 4 or 5 years long. And they always were like fine, right? But ended because they weren't working for one reason or another. And they were often full of some conflict, some miscommunication, some misunderstanding, just tension, frustration, confusion. Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I stay? Should I go? And where I felt really just like on top of my game at work and really like able to make quick, important decisions about my cases every day. In my personal life, I felt very out of control. And when I say personal life, I happen to have really strong relationships with my friends and family. So that was never really an issue that I focused on all that much in terms of what wasn't working for me. But definitely relationships and dating just felt like my story about myself was, I kill it at work, but I'm kind of like a shit show in love. And that was how I felt about myself. So I started working actually with a relationship coach towards the end of my legal practice. I then sort of concluded working in a government agency in DC where I wasn't actually practicing law anymore, but I was doing public affairs and communications work. But started at that time working with a life coach because I tried therapy. I tried different modalities to figure out what was going on in my relationships and felt like therapy was just, this is painting with a broad brush. I know therapy works for so many people, but for me, it felt like it just wasn't addressing the here and now. It was much more focused on things that had happened in my past that I couldn't really do anything about. And so I felt very stuck with what was happening to me, or so I thought, in my relationships. And I felt like there was nothing I could do to change my past. So I was kind of just screwed, right? And so I maintained this narrative that I was going to keep excelling at work and kind of just continue to muddle my way through relationships with no real solution. And something that it brought me back to, I'm tying this back to you guys, is when I was a 1L, my first year of law school, we had this like weekend success coaching retreat that this professor came in. She was this renowned expert at like how to excel and get the most out of your first year of law school. And one of the things she really hammered home on was like, don't fuss with relationships your first year of law school, or really in law school generally. Like, you don't have time for that. Your partner is not going to understand the workload, the demands, the stress, the pressure. They're just going to distract you and derail you and cause you to fail, which like as a 1L, we were like, oh my God, I'm gonna fail, right? So like,
I heard that so much when I was in law school. So many people were like, don't bother with the relationships, don't do it. And it's like, but clearly, like, you're not going to go through law school for 3 years all by yourself.
like, but at that stage, you're so like driven to succeed. And I didn't even go to like an Ivy League law school, but you're so like driven to just excel and progress. It's the kind of person that's attracted to law school that you're like, okay, like I'm going to fail if I eat bread for 3 years. I'm not eating bread. Like whatever it is that they say, you're like, okay, I won't do that. Right. So it was just so, it hit me so hard. And of course, like Angie just said, we still had relationships, right? But instead, and I'm not blaming this woman on all of my relationship failures, but like the experience then was kind of like, well, I'm not going to focus on this. I'm not going to spend any time trying to be intentional about what I'm looking for, what the right partner is for me, and, you know, be really thoughtful in my process of dating. Instead, I'm just going to like haphazardly date because I don't have time to worry about this, right? I don't have time to think about it. But like Angie said, we're not just going to be like isolated celibate weirdos for 3 years of law school. So I dated, but I ended up just sort of happening into some relationships because it felt like I didn't have the time or the ability, and it was a bad use of my energy to focus on dating. And I'm here to really offer you guys the opposite. I am a certified life coach and a relationship coach. I stopped practicing law at the end of 2019, or stopped working. I should say I wasn't practicing law for a couple of years before I stopped working, but I now work very hard, but I work for myself. I have my own coaching business. And the only reason that I left the practice of law was because I became certified as a coach and just loved this work so much, and started working with clients early in 2019. And from that point on, just the practice grew and grew and grew to the point where maintaining full-time work was no longer an option for me if I wanted to grow my coaching business. So now I work with mostly lawyers, not exclusively lawyers, on healing their relationship patterns. Because for me, it was something that once I figured out what I was doing wrong, and not wrong, but where I was sort of misunderstanding myself in the process, was the key to unlocking so many other blocks that I had in my life. And I really do think so many of us, particularly if we're successful and driven towards any career, not just the practice of law, but like any career-minded or career-focused or just self-starting individual, I think we've heard narratives about how relationships, you know, can derail you professionally because they are, the implication, right, is that the relationship is non-functioning, challenging, problematic in some way, dramatic, right? And so if that's what we're thinking of course, we're going to be derailed by that drama, by that challenge, when that's what we think being in a relationship means. But the three sort of main problems that I had with what I have now and what I would impart to you is, you know, life doesn't get easier after law school. And I'm sorry if I'm the first person to break that news to you, but practicing law is actually not harder or as hard. I think they're equally challenging in different ways, but law school is preparing you to be a lawyer, right? So if law school is challenging and time consuming, probably being a lawyer is also going to be challenging and time consuming. So postponing the ability to be derailed, right? Which is, again, what's being implied in that message, like you don't have time for relationships, right? Postponing the time where you're available to be derailed by relationship problems, like that time is never going to be better, right? You're never going to have more time to like lose derailing in your love life. So to postpone it until after law school is just putting off something that is never really going to get easier. The other thing I would say is that like focusing on any one thing, and this is kind of like what Angie picked up on, like to just be exclusively a lawyer, exclusively a law student, or exclusively just a professional of any kind. I work with a client who is a CPA. I work with clients who are in finance and who own businesses and are entrepreneurs. Like, if you are all entrepreneur all the time, like, I love coaching. I talk about this work because I'm passionate about it, but I'm still not a life coach 24/7, right? Like, there are times where we want to just shut off our professional selves and be something else, friend, sister, partner, mother, whatever it is, right? And so when we're in this mindset, we're like, it's all law school for 3 years, don't focus on anything else. Good luck. You will hate the practice of law by the time you graduate if that's all you focus on. Trust me. And then my third sort of issue with what she's saying is, if you do that, right? If by some crazy chance you are somebody who wants a relationship, right? There are plenty of people, I think, in the world who don't want that partnership. I'm not really talking to them, but like, if you're somebody who wants a partner and you're like, okay, I'm going to postpone it until after law school, I promise you, you'll derail with something else. Because again, it's like the focus on one thing is just not healthy. And just the life coach in me, not just the relationship coach, would say to any client, like, if you're on one thing all day, all the time, even if it's amazing, you will tire of that thing. And being one track minded like that will inevitably bring out something else in your life that you can derail with. So whether it's the relationship or some other distraction, like, it's that focus on one thing that I think derails us so much from the goals that we're trying to achieve. So what's the solution then? How do you date without getting derailed? I think, again, the focus when she relayed this message to us was like, relationships have problems inherently. And while this is true, and it's something that I say to all of my clients, that, there are always going to be areas where you and your partner don't see eye to eye, where there has to be compromise, where there has to be adjustment. It doesn't mean that any relationship is going to be fraught with confusion, drama, conflict. These aren't problems that you're just signing up for because you are falling in love, meeting your partner, and pursuing a personal life in addition to a private or a professional life, right? So I think the first problem is presupposing that a relationship requires drama and derailing and pain and all of the things, which for me were very much present until I found this coaching work, because I was thinking to myself, relationships are hard, right? But what if relationships weren't hard? What if they weren't harder than anything else in your life, right? Law school is hard. Practicing law is hard. That doesn't mean that you avoid going out into the world, getting a degree, getting a job, finding your, path in your career. Just because it's hard doesn't mean we avoid it because there's the potential for these issues to come up, right? It's all about how you manage the hard. And so if these things weren't problems and we didn't look at relationship issues as problems so much as just the basics of human encounters and human engagement, how could we see a relationship as just an opportunity to enrich our lives instead of signing up for all of this distraction and drama and derailment from our professional goals and our ambitions? So things that I commonly see in relationship issues, the three biggest problems that my clients come to me with are a combination of sort of not saying no enough, overly saying yes to the partner, and expecting a trade-off for that, right? It's like we people please because we don't set good boundaries. And then when we do that, it's like a quid pro quo for my lawyers, where we expect something in return, right? So we're like, I'm going to do this, or I'm not going to do this, right? I'm going to give up on going to an event to go with you to some event that's important to you and hope that it makes you happy, not really appreciate your reaction because you don't seem grateful enough. So then I'm going to put an expectation on you that you have to do the same thing for me down the road so that we're even, right? And so begins the drama, right? And so begins the derailment. And so what I work on with my clients is encouraging them to really get comfortable with resisting that natural instinct that we all have as social beings to take care of other people's feelings. I know that seems like the opposite of what you've been told your whole life, that we're supposed to take care of each other's feelings, not hurt each other's feelings, make sure that we keep our partners happy. And of course, when we love somebody, there is a genuine desire to be kind and caring, compassionate and loving to our partners and to do things that we think will make our partners happy. But to really not do things just because we are expecting a happy reaction from our partner, especially when it compromises our own goals, right? So perfect examples in law school, like that is a time-consuming experience for sure. There are things that if you do during law school or don't do during law school that will affect your success in your grades, in your experience, in your internships and externships and all the things, right? There are certain time commitments that just have to be met in order to successfully complete that degree. And being comfortable saying to your partner, I love you and no, those are the most powerful words that we can use to really cultivate relationships that succeed, right? Without the drama, without the guilt and the shame and the feeling like I should and feeling obligated and anticipating a negative reaction from the partner. And instead just saying, I gotta stay in and study tonight. Like this is me time so that I can make this degree happen for myself. So I can't go with you to this event, or not even that I can't, because you can, but I'm choosing not to. And I'm choosing not to because I'm choosing myself and this degree that is very important to me. In doing that, we are both avoiding people pleasing and setting a powerful boundary where we're saying, I'm putting myself first. And even though that may seem selfish and may fly in the face again of so much of like the taking care of people's feelings that we've been taught, it is truly the best thing we can do for a relationship when we are doing it from this authentic place of like, I'm taking care of myself. I don't expect anything from you. You don't have to stay in because I'm staying in. You don't even have to understand why I'm staying in. If you want to have your reaction, you get to have your reaction, be upset and be disappointed. I'm still going to stay here and take care of myself and my degree so that I can get what I came for, right? So that I can grow as a person and as a lawyer and as a law student. And so that's sort of a combination of people pleasing and boundary work that I tend to do with my coaching clients. The third issue is manuals, right? And that's where we get into expecting our partner to think, feel, or respond a certain way just because we want them to, right? This is like when we say no, or I can't, or, you know, I need to do studying instead of going to your parents' house for dinner, whatever it is, right? We expect them to understand, right? And the drama picks up from that scenario when it's like they're maybe not understanding, or maybe they're frustrated or disappointed or let down, right? And then it's like we find ourselves in this headspace of expecting them to be okay, needing them to be okay so that we can be okay. And it's very subtle. We think that we're upset that they're upset, but we're really not. We're upset ourselves because we expect, need, and put on them the expectation that they have a specific reaction, right? But we get to decide always that like we're saying no from our strongest space, and they may not like it, and that's okay, right? And that's something that I really work on too with my clients, is like getting okay with the people in your life not always being okay, but as long as you're okay and you're taking the best care of yourself, especially at a high pressure, high intensity time in your life, like law school, you are doing the best thing that you can for your relationship, right? So it's the combination of those three things, just to recap: resisting the people pleasing, setting clear boundaries, and letting go of our manuals and our expectations that they respond a certain way so that we can feel okay about taking care of ourselves, our schedule, our degree, all the things, right? And I would say, you know, these are life skills, right? It's like learning this process isn't just a process that you learn so that you can date and have a good relationship with your boyfriend, girlfriend, what have you, right? These are life skills so that like when your mom drops into town and is like, oh my God, I'm here. Like, don't you want to have dinner with me and then show me around the city where you're going to law school? You're like, I can't, Mom. Like, I set this time aside to study and do work. I have a test coming up. I have a paper due. Like, I can't, not that I can't, but it's like, I have to I have to place this as a priority in my life right now because it's important to me, because I'm choosing it, right? Because I'm choosing to go this professional path for myself and for my own development. And so I'm not going to go to lunch with you in the middle of the day when it wasn't planned or expected. And that's really just like a boundary setting skill that we benefit from using, whether or not we're in romantic relationships or we're just setting that boundary with other people in our lives. And frankly, learning boundaries and mastering the art of not people pleasing and not doing things just to get a reaction from somebody else is actually a skill set that can help us at work. So my narrative was that I was really successful at work and that I always knew how to handle those relationships, but I was really struggling in my romantic relationships. When I started working with my coach on relationships and dating, I realized how much I was people pleasing at work, how much I was doing to get a certain reaction out of a colleague or a boss or a supervisor, get recognition, get appreciated, right? How much do we say like, I don't mind that I had to do that thing or that I helped out in a certain way, but I would just really appreciate some recognition for it, right? And it's like, we think that's totally harmless, but it's actually setting ourselves up for so much disappointment because we're sitting there just waiting for this reaction from somebody that may or may not come. And we're sort of delaying our own happiness and satisfaction at work until we get this response from somebody else. So whether you're applying this work to your personal life and your romantic partnerships, or you're applying it to your job, like there's application across the board in our lives. And I would just say, our culture does work hard. Again, whether you're a lawyer or some other kind of professional, like there is always going to be the opportunity to work more. I have never been in big law. I've practiced in government agencies and in a mid-sized firm briefly for a couple of years. I've never had a boss be like, please work less. Please go home and take care of yourself and relax and work less. I've had great bosses that have been very understanding, and like after trial, they've been like, go home and rest, right? But like a boss is never going to be the person in your life who is like, you do you and take care of yourself. Like you need to be responsible for that. You need to take charge of your own self-care and self-maintenance and development and protection, right? Keeping yourself boundaried will serve you not only at work, not only in your relationships, but like literally across the board in your life. And the more comfortable that we can get with saying no in situations where we just don't want to be that one track person that's like, I'm only a lawyer, I'm only a girlfriend, I'm only a mom, I'm only whatever, like, but to be able to wear these multiple hats in our lives, it does require us sometimes to say no to the partner so that we can study, to say no to the boss so that we can go home to our kids, right? So it's protecting that balance and maintaining that balance in our lives and getting comfortable ourselves with the discomfort of potentially letting somebody else down, letting them have their reaction and taking care of ourselves so that we don't get derailed by the drama of our expectation that they not have or have a certain specific reaction that we were expecting. So I think this is a great lesson to learn early. I think the opposite actually of that professor, like if you can figure this out in law school, all the better, right? Than like postponing it the way I did. Again, not her fault, but like postponing it until way later in life when it just felt like it hit this breaking point for me. And I was like, why are my relationships ending one after the next for these very similar but very vague reasons, right? And so if you can figure this out while you are in law school, you'll be so ahead of the game because you won't have only figured out how to graduate law school, take the bar exam, and get yourself a good job. You will have figured out how to maintain balance in your life, which will just keep you happy in all of the areas of your life. So that is all I have for you guys. I'm done talking at you. I see there are some questions in the chat. I would also love to see any of you and hear your questions if you have any.
That was amazing, Rachel. Thank you so much for that. I mean, I think it's so true that we set these expectations for our partners of things that we want them to do and ways that we want them to react, and that can be very, very frustrating for us when they don't do those things. And I think it was a lesson that it took me a really long time to understand that, like, you're responsible for your own feelings. You're not responsible for other people's feelings. And that is really hard, because I think many of us, especially if you are a very empathetic person, many of us feel like we have to take on the emotions of other people who are in our lives, and we have to help them manage that. But you're just going to make yourself miserable doing that, because if you think managing your own emotions is hard, like, managing other people's emotions is impossible. I mean, it's difficult for us to think about our own emotions, how we react to things, and sometimes we catch ourselves saying, like, oh my gosh, that was completely a irrational way to respond to things. I overreacted, or I shouldn't have reacted that way. And it's hard enough to correct your own emotions. Just imagine, trying to be responsible for everybody else's emotions, even when, the ways that they react aren't necessarily rational, or the ways that they react aren't necessarily the ways that they should react. You shouldn't put yourself in that position where you're going to let yourself down by trying to manage their emotions. And that was a really hard lesson for me to learn. And it's still something that I struggle with all the time. I'm a people pleaser. I have to constantly remind myself, like, no, you can't please everybody. You can't think about, okay, if you tell them, this time is mine, and you disappoint them, well, that's their prerogative to be disappointed. But it's you taking care of yourself in your own time that helps you be a better lawyer, that helps you be a better business owner, that helps you be better in your own life. And so you get to manage that. And I think that is a really, really tough thing for most people to learn.
Yeah. And it's an ongoing practice, right? Because it's like, we have to continue to practice the experience of being uncomfortable. And it's like, you're uncomfortable either way, right? If you're people pleasing, like, that doesn't feel good. It feels like pressure, right? And so then there's like the people pleasing towards a result that you may not even really want or care about in your life, or you're like losing the time or the energy that you would be spending on something that you've invested in, like your law degree, right? And so it's like, the result is not serving you, and you're trying to people please them, and maybe they're not even having the reaction that you're trying to get out of them, right? Versus like the discomfort of saying no, sitting in that discomfort, but ultimately getting closer to the result that you want. So that's how we make those decisions, but it's not easy.
What do you think about, like, can you set other people's expectations to help you balance that better? Like, are there ways that you can talk to your family members, or ways that you can talk to your significant other to say, I'm about to go through this really, really difficult time in my life, and I'm not going to have a lot of time here. And, I'm going to need you to understand that I'm going to be managing myself, and you manage you, but I can't be responsible for that. I mean, are there things that you would suggest that people discuss with their family members or significant other as they're going into law school?
Totally. I think, I just noticed myself a couple of weeks ago having a conversation with some of the closer people in my life, because we're all in this stay-at-home situation because of 2020. Plus, like, I'm an entrepreneur, I'd be working from home anyway. But I think there is this expectation that has come up this year that, like, we're all available all the time, because, like, what else are we doing, right? And one thing that I kind of said to my friends and family was like, look, I love you guys. I want to engage with you, any time of day, all the time, but I'm running a business, right? If I don't work, I don't get paid. That's it, right? Whereas I think people that are employed by someone else, it's like, not that they're working less hard, of course, but like, they're getting a salary, whether they answer a text or respond to an email in the middle of the day or not. So I share that personal example because for me, I think it was about just saying to people, like, I love you so much. I'm not going to be responding to personal texts during the working hours, during the work day, because I am focusing on growing my business right now. My business is growing. The fact is, more hours are being taken up. I'm talking to people a lot during the day. So having another conversation may seem like a small thing, but it feels big to me in that moment when I'm talking all day to clients. So I think the same kind of conversation can be had. Again, I think it's tricky to say to people, like, expecting their understanding. It's like, we don't know. They may understand, they may not, but just saying it from a place of love that like, look, this is what my schedule is going to be like. Know that I'm going to want to respond to you, but that I may have to wait until the end of the day, the end of the week, the end of the semester, right? To like really give you what you're looking for in terms of maintaining our friendship, like whatever it is. Yeah. And saying it and letting them have their reaction and holding on to your reasons for why you're making that your rules. Yeah.
Got another question in the chat box. How do you properly tell close people to back off after numerous failed attempts?
Yeah.
Some of my family members are really pushy too, so I get it.
Say that's a totally fair question, and I read that. It's interesting that Angie read it as family, because I read it as like the former domestic violence prosecutors, like, oh my gosh, somebody's not leaving her alone. Whatever, she's laughing. Whatever the situation, okay, family. I'm like, let's call the police. No, so I think if that's what's going on, and you've said numerous times, look, like I need this time, I need this space, like I can't be there for you in this way now. I think that's when you just set the boundary, right? You've given them, first of all, we never owe anybody an explanation of our boundaries. You literally, I know this is hard to imagine, but like your phone can ring and you can just put it down. The end. And then you, Ambrosia, that's such a beautiful name. I love that. You get to just sit with all of your discomfort about putting your phone down, right? And manage your own shit that's going to come up over being like, oh, I'm not answering my phone, I'm a jerk, right? It's like, that's where you get to just say, and you've already like said out loud, you've articulated these boundaries to this family member, like you've given them more than you have to or should, right? And we never have to give anybody anything, but you've clearly given them a handful of warnings, right? And so now it comes just to that point where it's on you to really own your boundary, take ownership of it, and decide like, I'm just going to let the phone ring. They can handle the voicemail, right? And they can be in their discomfort just like I'm sitting in mine over not answering the call so that I can take care of my class and my obligations. I hope that helps. There's another question. Awesome advice for maintaining relationships. Do you have any advice about starting a relationship when we feel like we're busy with law school? I think it's something that we just let happen. If it happens, you need to be conscious of putting effort to pursue someone. Such a good question, Catherine. So what I would say to that is like, depends on where you're at, right? Like, are you looking for a relationship because it's something you genuinely want? The way you phrase the second half of that question, I would be curious whether you're like, 27 years old, it's time for me to start looking for a partner, right? Like, is that where you're coming from? Or are you like, I genuinely want this, right? Because I think don't let yourself be pushed along by age or expectations or society or anything like that. If you're like, I'm just living my life in law school and it's fine. And if the right guy enters or girl enters, I don't know your situation, somebody walks in and you're like, yes, I want to go out with this person, great, go. But if you're like not really trying to consciously create because it's not something you genuinely want, I wouldn't recommend putting pressure on yourself to be like, I should start consciously trying to create this, right? Because how fun is that if it's like another task that you just have to do, right? So I think it's really getting honest with yourself about what you're looking for. But if it's something that you're looking to create in your life right now, I would say be conscious rather than let it happen if it happens, because letting it happen if it happens was kind of my approach in law school and beyond, because I kept telling myself I didn't have the time to be conscious about it. But the thing is, you lose time by rushing. I know that sounds counterintuitive, but if you're like, I don't have time to consciously create this, so I'm just going to like let it happen if it happens, that's how you end up with somebody who's not looking for the same things as you, who doesn't communicate the way that you do, who doesn't prioritize the values in their life that you do, right? And those are harder barriers to navigate later on in a relationship. I think when we're conscious in the beginning and you put the time in the beginning to be like, I'm going to go on a date with this person. I'm going to go on a date with 3 people this week and really get to know them in the hour or 2 that I spend with them. Ask the good questions, listen to their answers, be focused on it for that period of time so that I can figure out, do we have common ground or not? It will save you time down the road where you're like getting more serious, really taking steps forward and realizing it's much more important that your fundamentals be on the same page. So does that make sense? I think it's really like whether or not it's super important to you right now to find that relationship. And if it is, I would recommend really being conscious of what you're looking for and going out and looking for that instead of letting it happen if it happens.
So, I guess one of the things that I struggled with while I was in law school is there's never a good point in law school to have a breakup. Like it's like constantly you're just in this pressure cooker and you're always under stress, and sometimes it leads you to say, okay, yeah, maybe this relationship isn't working for me, but I'm just going to keep it going until the end of the semester because I literally do not have time in my brain to break it up. You know, like how do you manage that? How do you figure out, okay, this isn't serving me, I should, let this go, so that it frees me up to think about other things, or should you stay until that point where your brain is?
I think, again, super frustrating answer of like, it depends, right? Which is like the lawyer answer. If you learn nothing else from law school, just learn how to say it depends. But I think I would say I would tend towards coaching my clients. If you know the relationship is over, end the relationship, right? Because it's best for you. It's best for them. I'm always concerned about what's best for my clients first. I coach them. It's much like the sort of fiduciary relationship with lawyers, right? Like they are my person, so I'm here advocating for them. But like if you are in a relationship you don't want to be in, you're living in resistance every day, right? The thing about breakups, there's actually never a good time for breakups, right? Like we never have even at a job, right? Like the case could be made that like, this is the worst time for me to be going through a breakup at work because I have nothing going on. So all I'm doing is work, trying not to cry. Versus like, this is the worst time to be going through a breakup at work because I'm so busy. I don't have any time to process my feelings, right? So it's like, no matter what, you can come up with a reason why this is the worst time to go through a breakup, because breakups are terrible. Like they are. And I feel like my clients sometimes show up and they're like, wait, tell me a relationship. Like, tell me that the guy that I love, like if we break up, I'll be fine. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. Like if you love him and you guys break up, you're not going to be fine. I can't fix that. I'm not a relationship coach that does magic. Like you're going to feel terrible if you break up. That's part of the deal, right? That's love. And I hear from, I don't have kids, but I have a puppy. But like when you love somebody so much outside of yourself, your heart is a little bit outside your body, right? And so whether it's children, whether it's pets, whether it's a partner, like when you sign up for that kind of love, you sign up for the pain of that potential loss. We can never control the circumstances around us, right? And as we're seeing in 2020, we are very much not in control of our circumstances. So a partner can leave anytime and we have to navigate the pain of that loss, right? And so we don't think about it all day because that doesn't serve us. And our lawyer brains sometimes want to spin and plan for the worst case scenario all the time. So that's another thing that I work on a lot with my clients is like, where can we stop prepping for the worst case scenario so that we can enjoy the life that we have right now? But I do think at the end of the day, the breakup, if it's imminent, like you said, Angie, if it's like, the relationship is over and the relationship be in the discomfort, it is a bigger scale of like ignoring Ambrosia's family members when they're calling, right? It's like, you're just saying no and sitting in the discomfort of knowing that that person is hurting, you're hurting, even when we're the ones doing the breaking up, it's still painful, right? But it's in the best interest of that result that you want, which is the next relationship, a clear mind, focus on your school, work, all that stuff. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I mean, it is hard to hear, right? Nobody wants to sit in that discomfort. And
it would be so better to just avoid it.
I know. Oh, and our brains are so good at avoiding discomfort. It is like amazing. They will jump through all sorts of hoops to avoid discomfort. And, you'll find yourself doing that in law school. But the problem is in law school, everything's uncomfortable. So Like, your brain is going to be jumping through so many hoops to avoid all that discomfort that sometimes it's going to be so jarring to you.
Totally.
So I love what you're saying. You know, I think it is really, really hard for us to embrace that and get into the right mindset to say, like, okay, it's going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to do it anyway. But I think, you know, that's all the relationships in our lives. You're signing up for, like you said, you're signing up to care about somebody. And that's going to be uncomfortable sometimes. That's going to cause you discomfort. And that's okay, you know, because the reward of it is that you care about someone and that you're also enjoying all the things that come along with that. But yeah, sometimes it's going to mean really uncomfortable situations at the worst time. You know, I went through breakups in the middle of finals. I went through breakups, you know, in the middle of the bar exam. I went through, you know, I mean, it happens. And it's also one of those things that I don't want you to not think about just because it's uncomfortable to talk about. Because I think a lot of lawyers feel this need that we need to put on this professional, we need to project this professional person out into the world all the time, every single moment. And that means, you know, you don't want to get too personal and you don't want to talk about the things that make you uncomfortable, like relationships and like breakups and all those things. And so you might feel afraid to ever discuss those things. But if you do feel afraid to discuss those things, you know, don't discuss them at work. But yeah, find an outlet to talk to about them, whether it's a coach or whether it's you know, a family member or somebody who you can, you know, bounce that off of, because that's going to be something that you're going to need. You're going to need an outlet in your life where you can talk about that somewhere. So make sure that you're not shutting yourself off from all that and just acting like it doesn't exist, because it does. It will continue to exist. Your heart, like, we as human beings just naturally want to form bonds and relationships. So like you need to know that that's going to be a part of your journey, no matter, you know, how hard you want it not to be. It's going to be. And our profession is one of relationships. You're constantly building relationships with other people and you're constantly having to manage those. So the more that you build the skills that you need in order to manage your relationships healthy, the better it will serve you throughout the rest of your life. I mean, trust me, all these things that Rachel is talking about, not just in romantic relationships, you know, but setting boundaries and managing your own expectations and knowing that, you know, you can't just put all these expectations on other people. I mean, those are going to be things that serve you in every single type of relationship that you have. Your relationship with work, your relationship with your colleagues and your boss. And, you know, you need to be able to manage all of those relationships too. These are all the same skills. So I love what you're teaching today, because I think it's something that a lot of people don't learn early on. And I wanted all of you guys to be able to hear, you know, her story on how it impacted her life, because I think, you know, Rachel went through what many lawyers go through. You feel like you are achieving and achieving and achieving, and in every other aspect of your life, you are a rock star. You are a rock star at work. You are getting the internships you want. You're doing everything that you want. You're doing well in school. You're getting good grades. But then your personal life is a mess. And you're like, why is this happening to me? And why do I feel in control everywhere else, but not in my personal life? It's because you're trying to probably sweep it under the rug. And that's not going to work. So don't ignore your personal relationships when you're going to law school. It's all part of the experience. It's all part of the journey.
One thing I would add to that too, Angie, is like definitely have an outlet, have a resource, have somebody that you can talk to. Watch self-development. There's so much out there, podcasts, and I love Tony Robbins. He's like all over YouTube. You can watch any of his stuff just to figure out how to get more curious about what your brain is doing. But one of the best ways to break the habit of avoiding discomfort is to write down what you're thinking. Ambrosia, when you asked about your family and just like how do you get them to back off, it's like you set that boundary. And when you do, because it's like we can ask them until we're blue in the face, but if they don't do what we're asking, then we're stuck with enforcing it. And so writing down just like what your thoughts are about being in that discomfort is at least one way of getting it out of your brain and onto a piece of paper. It's just like projecting it, purging it, right? Getting it out of your mind and actually looking at it, and then asking yourself, like, are these things that I'm thinking even really true? Like, am I really a bad person if I avoid this phone call? Like, am I ungrateful or unkind or a bad daughter, sister, friend, whatever it is, for not picking up my phone while I'm doing work that is important to me so that I can be the professional that I want to be, right? Because we have these thoughts like, I'm a terrible person. I should be answering this phone call. Like, I shouldn't ignore them. And it's like, that stuff isn't even true. But when you can see it in writing, you're like, oh, that's crazy. Of course I'm not a bad person. So I would say if all else fails and you're not like in a situation where you're able to hire a coach or work with a coach one-on-one, just writing your thoughts down when you're feeling really uncomfortable will help you see them for what they really are.
Love that. Let's see. How do you identify whether the feelings you have for another person is love and not infatuation or attraction?
Oh, that's a really, really good question. I think I would put that back on you, that like, you have to just know. I would say infatuation and attraction are components potentially of love, but may not necessarily mean love, right? Like, I think love can include infatuation and attraction, but infatuation and attraction may not include love. And so I think love is just a farther along down the road kind of draw to somebody. And I think love really is, I really do believe love is unconditional, right? So it's, again, coming back to the boundaries, coming back to the expectations that we have of somebody. It's like, unconditional love doesn't mean like we love you even when you're acting crazy, but it means like we accept you and love you even when you're having a reaction that we don't like and or can't control, right? So I think infatuation and attraction is more like, it doesn't run as deep as a truly unconditional love that I think is what we all strive for in our partnered relationships. Because when the love in a partnered relationship is unconditional, it means my partner is free to not like that I'm going to stay in and work instead of go out with him. And he gets to not like that, and I get her anyway, right? So it is, I think love is farther along the road from infatuation and attraction. And when you get there, you'll just know you're there. How do you stop someone you love from entering in your professional life? Is there a way to communicate to them so they understand boundaries? Yeah, so again, I would just say there are ways to communicate it to them, but it sounds like you've tried, from the way you're asking this question, like you're looking for like the magic way where they're going to finally get it, like kind of the way Ambrosia was feeling. So my guess is you've tried all the ways and you're sort of holding out a manual for them that they follow your instructions, right? Like your expectation is like, I've given you the boundaries, please honor them. But like, sometimes people don't do what we want them to do, right? Like they want you to let them all up in your life and you don't want to do that. So you're not doing what they want. They're not doing what you want. So the way to break that cycle of like, they're not doing what I want and I'm not doing what they want and we're at odds with each other, is to just be the one to sit in your discomfort and say, the ringing phone, just gonna put it down, put it on silent, put it on do not disturb, and ignore it. And be with all of the feelings that are going to come up for you that are just like, this feels terrible, I'm a bad person, I'm a bad daughter, I'm a bad friend, whatever it is. Write that stuff down, look at it, and be like, wait, am I a bad daughter because I'm not answering my mom's phone call right now? Or am I just a law student who has a shitload of reading to do, excuse my language, and needs to get it done, right? And doesn't want to be up until 4 a.m. doing my reading. So I'm putting me first. And I would also really encourage you to ask yourself, is there a problem with putting yourself first? Is that a bad thing? Or is that what you were put on this planet to do? Prioritize yourself. Nobody else is going to put you first if you don't. So I would say you've tried communicating the boundaries. Why not just create them and decide that you've given them all the notice they need? That's my suggestion.
Love it.
Exactly. See, Ambrosia's ready to be a coach. She's like,
aside from setting the manual, make sure you make time for yourself, even if it means ignoring people longer. Yeah, that's true. You got to make time for yourself. And those are boundaries that are hard to set. So, yeah, well, this has been amazing, Rachel. Thank you so much for joining us today. We'll be posting the recording of the meetup on YouTube, so be sure to check that out. We have another meetup on Thursday. This one I'm really excited about because it's about a non-traditional person's career path. And so Devorah actually had kids while she was going to law school, and she was thinking about whether or not she should go to law school when she was already working. And so she went to law school after having quite a few of her own life experiences. And I think that a lot of people who are thinking about going to law school are struggling with, okay, should I go live my life, go get some experience in some sort of career path and go to law school later on, or should I just go straight out of undergrad? And I think this meetup will be really good for people who are at a later stage in life and thinking, yeah, now I'm ready to go to law school, and I just want to see, why other people made that decision and how they made that decision. And it'll also be good for people who have a lot of time ahead of them and are wondering, should I take a gap year or should I go right now? So please come join us on Thursday. And we also have our weekly happy hour, our biweekly happy hour on Friday, where we're going to have law students, pre-law students, and lawyers who are all going to interact together. The virtual happy hours are really fun because you actually get to interact with people one-on-one. So come join us. We'll split you up into breakout rooms. You're going to get to meet a new buddy, and you'll actually get to talk to people. So please come join us on Thursday and Friday, and I hope you guys all have a wonderful week.
Thanks, Angie.
Thanks, Rachel. Bye. Bye.